The following is a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.
The UAB Director's Chair. We do it every single week with Mark Ingram, the athletic director for your UAB Blazers. He joins us right now on TKR and Tony Curry Radio. You can hear the show at least 5 times during the week. And, of course, wherever you get your podcasts, we're available on every major indice out there. Just search UAB Director's Chair or Tony Curry Radio, and you're good to go. And today, we're going to talk some portal. We're going to talk about some UAB spring practice. Trent Dilfer's getting after it, but also we're going to be doing our best super groups. Which honestly, Mark, and good morning to you, and great to have you back on the show, was a little easier than trying to find the best guitarist. The list is a little smaller.
It's a smaller list, but a lot of fun, and there's a lot of great ones, man.
No, and you know what's interesting too is I had realized that a lot of bands that I thought were just bands were actual super groups. I never realized, and I knew this because I was doing classic rock. But for example, Cream is considered a super group, but I just always thought.
I would say so. They're on my list.
Yeah, I just thought it was a band that got together and they were actually a super group because of the pieces that were put in place. All right, first of all, spring practice continues. Last week, I guess, for spring practice, the UAB Blazers. I know they just came off their spring game. A lot of scoring there for the defense in this particular case, and I know you mentioned what can fans expect from this UAB Blazers football team in 2023, and you're like, there's going to be a lot of points put up on the board. What did you see and what did you like about it?
Well, before the game started, we did a dragon egg hunt for kids at halftime. And before the game started, Alex Mortensen came up to me and he said, he's our offensive coordinator, and he said, "Hey, please don't judge me by today's performance." And I said, "What do you mean?" He said, "Our play calling is going to be pretty vanilla." And I just kind of laughed. And then Trent Dilfer walks up 60 seconds later and he says, "Hey, this is good." I was like, "Yeah, this is a good feel, good crowd. I'm liking this." And we're just, how's the team? Oh, good. And he says, "Hey, the most exciting thing about today is going to be the dragon egg hunt." I said, "Trent," "Hey, man, we are trying to sell tickets. Could you throw it deep a couple of times? Just take it and throw it. Just throw it as far as you can." So I think they tried to keep it pretty vanilla, but we had a couple guys get banged up, but I think not too bad, hopefully. And that's usually what you're trying to get through spring practice with, is without injuries that would prevent them from playing, this fall. And I think so far we've accomplished that for the most part, not completely, but for the most part. And but he felt good about it. And spring practice is a lot easier on the defense. And what I mean by that is, if you don't know what to do and you play defense, go to the ball.
Yeah.
If you have no idea what to do, just go to the ball. And I'm certainly not trying to minimize what they do, because, they got to understand coverage and that kind of thing. But, the offense has really got to have time together to work in sync. You're the left tackle and I'm the left guard, and we got to work with the center. We all have to take at the same time, the same step, the same direction, going to block the right guy, and in what direction and that kind of thing, and take the proper angles. There's just a little bit more technical work to it that takes time. And so installing what I'm guessing is a fairly complex offense in a short amount of time is not easy. So I think offensively we saw what we should probably expect to have seen. But they play hard, and they were physical, and I think that was all really positive. Now, Coach Dilfer has made it very clear, and did so after the game in the locker room to the players, that this week was going to be a really hard week at practice. And he said, it'll be the hardest week of your life. And he said, "I want to see who's going to compete. We got to compete." And so they'll finish that up this weekend. Saturday will be the last day of spring ball. And I think he feels good about where they are right now.
No, and as a guy that's got a brand like Trent Dilfer, and so excited to have him on board. I think it was the best hire of 2022, and maybe one of the best hires that UAB's ever seen. What kind of coach is he? Is he I hate when people say he's a player's coach. If you're doing your job, he's a player's coach, right? If the coach is leaving you alone because you're getting your job done, he's a player's coach. He likes you. Is he more of a disciplinarian kind of guy? Is he a micromanager? Can you put a title on what he's going to be this early in his tenure there?
I think most every coach, there's very, very few coaches that didn't play football in college or play their sport. There are some coaches who didn't play their sport. They were a manager or whatever, and they went on to be a great coach, and good for them. But very few, if any, have coached after playing at the level that Trent Dilfer played at. And I think that gives him incredible this probably, I don't know if it's a double negative, but his credibility level is really high with our players. When he speaks, they listen, and they know he knows what he's talking about, and they know that, at a high level, he's done it, and he knows what it's going to take to get to the next level if that's what they wish to do, and he speaks the truth to them. He tells them, he'll say, "Hey man, you're a really good player. You're not a pro." And they don't always like to hear that. Not everybody wants to hear that. But honestly, I can tell you as a player myself, that's all I ever asked for from the coach. "Hey, man, if you don't think I can play, you just tell me, and I can quit wasting my time."
Yeah.
And if you don't think I'm going to play next spring or next fall or whatever, I don't need to get my hopes up thinking that I'm going to be, first, second, third, whatever on the depth chart if I'm not.
Yeah.
So he's big on being very direct with them and being very honest with them. And he's not mean about it. He just says, "Hey, I think you're good, but I don't think you're elite." Or, "Hey, I think that you're really good, and if you would work harder, you could be elite." He just tells them what they need to really hear. But very frequently, I think they would probably tell you they've never heard that before. The players don't get that much. When you're a really, really high level player in high school, which every one of these guys were, that we forget how much better they are than, a high school. And talent wise, you're coming out of your high school, you're the best player they've ever had, probably, or certainly one of. And everybody just tells you that all the time about how great you are and how great you are. Well, you're the right? You're the greatest one there, and that maybe you're the best one they've ever seen. But it reminds me of that movie 16 Candles. You remember when Anthony Michael Hall is talking to Molly Ringwald, and he's sort of introducing himself. They're at that school dance early, and he says something to her, and she says, "Oh yeah, you're one of those dorks, aren't you?" And he goes, "Yeah, but I'm the king. I'm kind of like the king of the dorks. So I got that going for me." Like, are you king of the dorks, or are you an elite player? And so there's a difference, right? And so anyway, Trent is very matter of fact. He's very direct with them, which I appreciate, and I think ultimately the players appreciate hearing the truth. But sometimes that truth hurts, and so yeah, he's having very real conversations like, "Hey man, here's what you can do if you want to get on the field. This is what you need to do this summer, this off season. This is what we see in you, what we believe in you." But for the most part, he's a very encouraging guy, and he's direct with them and telling them what is it they need to do to be better and to get on the field.
Yeah, if you're going to be a dork, you might as well own it. He's Mark Ingram, the UAB athletic director. This is the call, the UAB Director's Chair. You can hear at least 5 times a week on TKR and wherever you get your podcast at Tony Curry Radio. That's Curry with a K, or UAB Director's Chair. We're going to get into the transfer portal as well as our best super groups this week coming up in just a few minutes. We do have an email here, info@tonycurryradio.net about hoops. John in Southside just emailed just a few seconds ago. Perfect timing. Talking about the Asheville Championship in 2023 for the men's basketball hoops program. Going to be playing Clemson, Davidson, and Maryland. He said, "I listen to the show every single week, and I've heard several times Mark talk about it really difficult to get some of these bigger, better basketball teams from the big groups, the groups of fives, no problem, but the main groups, the top fives, for home at homes. If you can create your own types of tournaments, which I absolutely love. I love these you can call them preseason tournaments or whatever they are. You can call them whatever you want. This is going to be happening in November. But how difficult is it to put together a tournament like this, man? To be getting wins against the Davidson, against the Maryland, and against the Clemson would be wonderful for the UAB basketball program when it comes down to resume time.
Yeah, no doubt. And we are unclear right now which of those two teams will play, but we play 2 of those.
Yeah.
So any combination is great. Credit to Coach Kennedy and his staff for being able to get into that thing. And it comes down to I don't want to compare us, to Butler and Wichita State, who had those runs into the Final Four a few years back. But when they did that, they elevated their status amongst, the autonomy conferences who then became willing to go to those places because their fan bases saw them as a worthy opponent.
Yes.
These big programs, these sort of blue bloods of basketball, they can't go to your gym and lose. It doesn't matter how good you are. Their fan base won't tolerate it, and ultimately they're trying to, it's like standing on a teeter-totter all the time. You're balancing fan support and kind of like fan trust in your ability to get the team to a championship, and are you doing things right, and do you know what you're doing, are you capable and qualified and all that. And so when Wichita State and Butler did that, all of a sudden they got invited to play in things that they had not been invited to, and other sort of the long time classic powerhouse programs became more willing to go to their gym. And so credit to Coach Kennedy and the staff for, winning the championship last year in Conference USA, getting to the tournament, and then getting back to the championship this year. That's the first time we've been in back-to-back tournaments since 1986. Wow. And so that says a lot about, how we're growing and evolving. And I know we didn't win the NIT championship, but you're in it. That's not easy to do. And so anyway, all that together, we finished with a ranking of 39, and those programs are being asked to play people who have a ranking no worse than X. And so being 39, you're a top 50 program now, which matters to everybody else when it comes to getting selected into the NCAA tournament next year. So, we're excited about that event. It's a big deal for us. Great teams and just a terrific opportunity, and it'll be televised, so all of our fans will get to watch.
The UAB Director's Chair with, of course, the athletic director for the UAB Blazers. He's kind enough to join us every single week for a great podcast. You can hear it at least 5 times a week on the TKR app through Apple, Tony Curry Radio through Android, and wherever you get your podcast. Mark, I never thought I'd say it, but there's now a transfer portal top 25. And the numbers I've seen, and again, I did some research, but roughly 20, 21, 22% of all student athletes right now are in the transfer portal, which is crazy to me. But yet I also see as recently as 2022, 50% of those kids that get into the transfer portal are unsigned. In other words, they're just kind of floating around.
Right.
Julie in Southside asked a very interesting question based on that as well. These emails are perfect timing here. If a player wants to go in the transfer portal, must he or she decommit from the school before they get in the transfer portal? Question number 1. Question number 2, can they reach out to another university they want to go play for while they're still playing for that university? What are the recruiting bylaws, if you will? Can a coach come in and actually recruit a kid that's actually committed to another school because he knows he's going to be in the transfer portal? How does that work?
So I'll start with that one. So coaches and players are not supposed to speak to one another until a player is in the portal. That is an NCAA violation. However, I think it happens, unfortunately, all too often. And quite candidly, I think if I was a player myself, I would want, because of the statistic you gave of 52%, did you say 52%?
Yeah, 50%.
That don't get signed?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm surprised it's not worse than that. I would have guessed 60%. But anyway, but because of that statistic, if I was a student athlete, I'd want to know, did I have a home before I got into the portal, right? And so the system is broken. I don't care for our transfer rules right now. I think it's a mistake. But we were at another university last year, and according to my coaches, during warm-ups, the other team's coaches were basically recruiting a couple of our guys, hey man, you need to come here, that kind of thing. And now I don't know if that's true or not, but there's sort of rumor of that kind of thing all the time. And there's some level of it that is definitely happening because, again, teams need players, and sometimes players get excited about different opportunities. And, I don't have any problem with a guy or a young lady who wants to transfer because they're not playing and they like to play. I get that. Sometimes we get recruited out of high school and we're good, but maybe we're not quite as good as we thought, or we are as good as we thought, but there's another person on the team who's just a half step faster,
Yeah.
And so now you're a perfectly good player, but only one person gets to play in, at your position or whatever. And so you decide to move on. I don't have any problem with that. The problem that I have is that in the old system, before the transfer portal, and what was Julie's first question? It was something about
she wanted to know, is it okay to be in contact with somebody while you're still committed to a particular school? And you answered that question. Do you have to go to the transfer
she said
portal?
you have to decommit.
Yeah, do you have to decommit?
So here's that part. So today the transfer portal is simply an electronic form that they can go to a website and click and do, and they can handle it all themselves. Most of the times they go to the compliance office to ask, hey, how do I get in? But if they have a friend that's done it somewhere else, they can just say, hey man, how did you do this? And they can get in.
Okay, so if they're unsigned, they go to the transfer portal. Can they no longer play for the team that they're committed to? Or are they just stuck in La La Land?
We're blending two things. Unsigned is say a kid in high school. They don't go to the transfer portal.
Yeah.
A person in the portal is already at a university. There's no signing at that point. What they do is, but they just go to this online form. They fill it out. Now they're in the portal. Now they're available for conversation. Now they can have people recruit them and contact them, and vice versa.
But if they're not contacted or recruited, can they continue to play for the team they're with?
I would tell you that in almost all cases, no. And here's why.
Yeah.
When you go, if I'm the coach and you're Tony, you're the player, and you go in the portal, hey man, you quit.
Yep.
But now, right, that's you've quit. I don't need you in the locker room telling everybody else, man, forget this place. I'm out of here. I don't need a bad locker room person. So you almost always, but not always, almost always, it's, hey partner, I appreciate you. You need to clean out your stuff, and we'll part ways. And we finished paying for their semester. We're not breaking their kneecaps here, but you're trying to manage the rest of the roster, which is a challenge. And like I said, you don't need any negativity in the locker room. So there are cases where if the student athlete goes to the coach first and explains their situation, the coach will allow it. Let me give you an example. Hey, I want to go to graduate school. I want to get a degree in this. I've applied at UAB, but I haven't heard yet. I'd happily stay, but I need to go into the portal because I want to keep playing my sport. And if I can't get into graduate school at UAB, but I do get into graduate school at wherever, I would like to try and play there, And so that's very different than a sort of a disgruntled, unhappy player that's not getting any playing time that says, I'm out of here, I'm quitting, right? So there are arrangements where it works out. The worst part about the portal to me is that it used to be that if a person wanted to transfer, they had to have a conversation with the coach. Yeah. Hey coach, I would like to transfer. Here's why. I'm homesick, or I'm not playing as much, or whatever. I don't like it here. I want to get a degree in something else. And so it used to be that you had to have that talk. You don't have to have that talk anymore. And what that talk did was it would allow the coach to say, hey, Tony, hang in there, man. I know you're a freshman, and these guys, are playing in front of you. They've been here for 4 years. Like, they're bigger and they're stronger and they're faster. You're going to be that. But they were just like you. It at least gives you a chance to have that conversation. Or the coach might say, hey, Tony, I agree with you. I can see you're not happy, and it is going to be tough for you to get on the field here. And I get it. How can I help you? Like that. That's what used to happen that doesn't happen anymore. And I think that's a problem. It's because it just makes you think, right?
Yeah.
It made you think, talk, and they don't talk anymore. They just jump in, they get upset at practice, and they boom, I'm in the portal.
And that should probably go with loyalty and anything, whether it's your job, whether it's your relationships, whatever it is. Maybe have a conversation before you jump ship. He's Mark Ingram, the UAB athletic director.
An emotional decision, right?
Yeah, exactly. Let's have a little conversation about why you're not happy here, and let's see if we can make that work. Every single week we get into the best guitarists, best players. We did best frontmen this week. I wanted to get into classic rock's best super groups. We only got about 10 minutes to get into it, and I know you're driving, but you have a list. Give me your honorable mentions. Keep it kind of short, and then I want to get your top 4 super groups. We'll rip through it. Who are your honorable mentions?
Well, I love you. You know, my all-time favorite rock band is Van Halen. With those two brothers, Alex and Eddie, they didn't come together as a super group, but between them and David Lee Roth, who we mentioned in our frontman category, that's three members of a four-person band who you and I both agreed should be at least in the honorable mention, if not the Mount Rushmore of their position in the band, and so I've got them in my honorable mention. Here's one for you, Mr. Big, who has Jeff Beck that we talked about as a guitarist, and they had Billy Sheehan as maybe he's certainly one of maybe the all-time greatest bass players ever. I put them in the supergroup category. We talked about Cream. Yeah. Come on, man. Yeah, I mean, right. You said it. They didn't. You said they were a super group, and I thought they were just a band that came together, but just incredible what they were able to do. I'm not a huge Rush fan personally, but they were incredible. What they did musically. How do you not love Aerosmith? One of the things that I think is so impressive about them is how long they.
And you're kind of straying a little bit here, because you're kind of talking about groups that you consider super. I'm talking about actual members from other groups getting together to cause a super group. Because I mean, Aerosmith has been Aerosmith, but I get it. I mean, it's your list. You can do that.
It's my list. Yeah, I probably didn't answer the question properly. And then again, because of how long they've been doing it, Kiss, I think it's just one of the monsters of all time rock and roll. So that's my honorable mention list.
I will go with Audio Slave obviously was considered a super group, and again, these are members of other bands have gotten together to create something called a super group. There was a band called the Big People that had not Rick Ocasek, but Benjamin Orr from the Cars, had the drummer from Ted Nugent's band, Van Zant from Leonard Skinner was in it. They didn't come out with an album. They just went on a tour, which was a lot of fun. The Highwaymen, obviously, the group of Chris Crosby, for those guys getting together. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, they all were solo guys. They got together, did a thing. You mentioned Cream. Bad English was considered a great monster super group with John Waite. Power Station with members of Duran Duran with Robert Palmer, I thought was fantastic. Chicken Foot with Sammy Hagar, and obviously Anthony is part of that group. Velvet Revolver, and then a group that a lot of people just thought, and I think they had 3 albums with Asia. Members of Yes, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and King Crimson all getting together to create that super group was great. And by the way, if you pull up like the 10 best super groups, Cream is like number 1 on almost every person's list, but I'm putting it in there as an honorable group. Yeah. But there's another band that Clapton and Baker were part of that is on my super group. And I'll start. I'm going to go with Blind Faith, only because Rick Gresh, a lot of people didn't know him from Family, but the fact that Stevie Winwood was in that group as well. You're talking about 3 monsters, Baker, Clapton, and Steve Winwood. And I know that Clapton and Winwood actually toured several years ago, and they just did a ton of Blind Faith and Traffic tunes, which was just unbelievable to hear. But that's going to be my first Mount Rushmore supergroups. Who you got?
Well, that immediately makes me think of Winwood and Phil Collins, with Genesis. I mean, that was a bit of a super group. So I'm not sure I followed the category properly, but what about the Eagles? I've got the Eagles as an all-time great. When you think about the volume of talent, person to person to person across the board, I think the Eagles, again, they had so many hits and they were so successful. They're my first one of the Mount Rushmore category.
Yeah, and you're kind of doing this backwards, which I'm kind of cool with, because normally when you've got a band that's created as a band as the Eagles, and then everyone kind of goes off, you're talking about Timothy B. Schmidt, you're talking about J.D. Souther, you're talking about Glenn Frey, you're talking about Don Henley, you're talking about now Vince Gill. It's kind of it is considered a super group when you've gotten all those people together. I'm going to go with, and I know people are going to think it's crazy, I'm going to go with the Damn Yankees, just because I liked everybody in that band. I love Jack Blades and Night Ranger. I'm a huge Night Ranger fan. Tommy Shaw from Styx was just an absolute monster. He had a song called Girls with Guns, which is a fantastic show. You got Ted Nugent. You put Ted Nugent, the Eddie Flippin' Band was on. And then Michael Corleone, who a lot of people didn't even realize, the drummer. The Damn Yankees, they only had 2 albums. They were supposed to have a third. Our good friend Damon Johnson was supposed to actually be on that third album. It never, they got in the studio, recorded it, and they were just like, let's not release it. So that Damn Yankees, the volume 3's out there somewhere, but it never got released. But I'm going to go with Damn Yankees. Who's another super group you got?
All right. Well, Queen, we've mentioned all these of my Mount Rushmore category. We've mentioned all these at some point. But when you talk about the individual players from our previous categories, and that's how I came, to this conclusion with me with Freddie Mercury leading the charge there. But just an incredible band that had a wild sound that was wild, meaning just very different. Every song was different, and again lasted for a long, long time, and were super successful.
There you go. I'm going to go with Bad Company. And a lot of people didn't realize that Bad Company was an actual super group. It was a band that was put together with a bunch of guys who were already in other bands. Paul Rodgers and Simon Kirk obviously came from the band Free. Lead guitarist Mick Ralphs, who I inadvertently did not mention as one of our greatest guitar players last week. We probably should have done that, of course. He was in the band. He came from Mott the Hoople, All the Young Dudes, great song. And then Boz Burrell, another one of these guys from King Crimson. Man, you don't realize just how good King Crimson was, because when you start doing all these super groups, I don't know how many members were in King Crimson, but it seems like every super group's got a member of King Crimson. So I'm going to go with Bad Company. Who's your third?
Led Zeppelin. Again, we've talked about several members of the band being, on our best of all time in our members of the band category, between guitar, vocals, and drums. That's how I landed with those guys on Mount Rushmore, Led Zeppelin.
All right, and this is like Jimi Hendrix. You just got to put him in, and then you pick whoever else is around him. But the Traveling Wilburys. First of all, whenever you do a super group, it normally doesn't work. And why is that? Because you've got a lot of super great musicians, and it's like a marriage, man. It's like putting 5 men and 5 women in a room and telling them to get along for a couple of years. But the Traveling Wilburys did it for an extended period of time. Right. Yeah. When you're talking about Dylan, Petty, Orbison, Lynn, and Harrison, I mean, I don't know how you get 5 egos that big. They're all songwriters. They all fronted their groups. So you could say certainly Harrison did not, but everyone else did. They were solo guys, and then you're putting them in a studio and telling them to write new material. I mean, if they all 5 went on tour together and just did their own music, it would be outrageously wonderful. But the fact that they wrote so many great songs together and the self-respect that they had for each other, they allowed each member to sing different verses, to write different songs. And they did it together. I think it's crazy. So I'm going to go Traveling Wilburys, my number one super group. And what is your number one super group?
Rolling Stones, Keith Richards, Mick Jagger. I wasn't a huge Charlie Watts fan. You mentioned him in your drummers category. Yeah. And he was a guy when I was playing drums for Superloop and the Yard Goats, Charlie Watts was a guy we kind of teased about. It was very basic, very simple, but you had him on your list, and then I don't know how you ignore Keith Richards and Mick Jagger together. So that's how I came up with Rolling Stones as my all-time number one super group.
There you go. All right, we'll come up with
I thought about the Beatles, but I didn't put them in I don't think they're classic rock category. So I did not include the Beatles.
That's all right, man. That's cool. And I mean, certainly the Beatles, you could certainly make an argument as a super group. Obviously, they didn't come together as a super group, but I mean, all 4 guys were super successful at every level, from the solo level too. And you just don't see that in bands. So I could certainly see that as well. All right, Mark, go do your thing. And we'll catch up next week here for the UAB Director's Chair. We'll come up with another little rock Mount Rushmore kind of thing. If you have any ideas, shoot them to me and we'll get after it. Okay.
That's great, man. Have a great week.
Thank you, brother. You too.
This has been a special presentation of Tony Curry Radio.